Welcome back. The government's taking its recently introduced national training agency to the Family Islands, more specifically Grand Bahama, Abaco, Eleuthera, and Exuma. According to Labor and National Insurance Minister Shane Gibson, the idea is to assist in the training and development of residents on those islands and bring them into the work pool. The training is being offered free of charge. The National Training Agency was officially launched on July 15th and is expected to begin the task of decreasing youth unemployment by implementing job training programs and human resource services to facilitate a network of job creation programs. It is anticipated that the project will adequately prepare young adults, in particular those 25 years and under, for successful entry into the workforce. Now, Minister Gibson made the announcement during the opening session of the Bahamas Hotel Catering and Allied Workers Union's Shop Stewards Conference this morning. At the time, he encouraged the group to motivate their members to perform at the highest possible standards and to stay abreast of current trends, new developments, and changes within the labor and industrial relations rules and regulations in accordance with the country's statute laws. Now, they were also told to put their best foot forward as they seek to encourage their members to always create memorable vacation experiences for guests as well as Bahamians, while simultaneously providing the best service to their employer. Apart from that, they must work with their employers to ensure that they are able to provide workers with better pay and benefits. Well, based on the numbers coming out of the 2010 census, there are between 10 and 15,000 Bahamians living with some form of disability, a number that officials say is much lower than the true figure. Nonetheless, it gives us a good idea of what we're dealing with. In fact, it's safe to presume that it's with this in mind that Social Services Minister Melanie Griffin signed the Bahamas on to the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Bahamas becomes the 157th country to do so, setting the framework for the introduction of national disability legislation. That legislation should be before Parliament before the end of the year. And Chief Welfare Officer for the Disabilities Affairs Division, Leonard Cargill, couldn't be more pleased.
Things that matter to them is they want training, they want a hand up, they want transportation, very, very key for what they want, transportation. We should facilitate that transportation, right? And that is very, very key. If people buy into the idea that we're all in this together, right? We all have to buy into that idea. We are in this country to make it a better place. If we buy into that concept, I think we'll begin to see problems begin to diminish.
Now, according to Minister Griffin, the draft disability legislation includes a framework for establishing a national commission for disabled persons. Mr. Cargill is expecting that commission to really be the teeth of the proposed legislation.
And this will be done by giving the commission teeth. For example, if you have a building and it's a public building, that building must be accessible. And so the commission will give you the opportunity to make your building accessible, right? They will ensure that schools are all accessible and that hospitals are accessible. And everything that applies to the benefit of persons with disabilities, the legislation will guarantee those rights and opportunities and those privileges. And if for those persons who do not comply, there will be penalties.
Mr. Cargill added that Bahamians with disabled family members should not be ashamed of them. They should also contact the Disability Affairs Division at their Centerville office at 325-2251. Again, that's 325-2251. A new Fisheries Act is headed to Parliament meantime, but before getting to that stage, officials want some feedback from stakeholders. Kandia Smith has the story.
The new Draft Fisheries Act is looking to address 4 pillars: governance, management, licensing and control, and enforcement. Officials have, for the last several months, been tweaking the 30-year-old legislation to reflect what's happening today and to create a framework for regulations in the industry. It's in this vein that the government hired London-based consultancy agency the Global Law Group to help make this happen. The company's director, Chris Headley, spoke to reporters about what the government is trying to achieve.
The idea is to create a new framework for the fisheries sector, a new legal framework which will give all of the tools and powers and responsibilities the department needs to better manage the fisheries in the future. So the idea of the Act is that it addresses what the government can and can't do rather than what the fisheries industry itself can and can't do. So as Mr. Brainan was explaining in his introductory remarks, it's not addressing the regulations such as the closed seasons, the types of fish you can catch, the areas you can catch. It's looking at the powers and functions of the government itself. So the sorts of things that we are looking at in the Draft Act are creating a new framework for governance.
Permanent Secretary Anthony McKinney stressed the importance of getting feedback from stakeholders.
This initiative is designed to update the fisheries legislation to ensure that it's relevant to the circumstances, the conditions, the current policies of the government for the advancement of the fisheries sector, and to ensure that the stakeholders ultimately will be able to benefit from whatever the changes are, and that is why this validation workshop this morning involves a diversity of persons from the sector.
Now, Bahamas Sports Fishing and Conservation Association President Prescott Smith is hoping the proposed legislation addresses the potential for fisheries to bring in even more government revenue.
What needs to happen in the Bahamas is opening up new fisheries that are more sustainable so that you take pressure of it. And so, having traveled around the entire Bahamas through years in the Defense Force, we have not scratched the surface of the fishing industry in the Bahamas. What is lacking is we need to have the training programs and infrastructure to open up fishing for red snapper in deep water, black snapper, silk snapper, vermilion snapper, pelagic fish, and these would create thousands of new jobs for Bahamians.
Officials say they don't expect all the industry's issues to be resolved, but it should provide the framework to make this happen. They say depending on what comes out of today's workshop, the consultants may have to go back to the drawing board so that the proposed legislation meets the needs of both the government and stakeholders. Candia Smith, JCN News.
Our final stories are up next.